Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling the origins of the Laz people.
Right, the Kartvelian group you find mainly on the Black Sea coasts, Turkey, and Georgia mostly.
Exactly. And we've gathered a whole mix of research, historical, linguistic, genetic, archaeological, anthropological stuff.
And importantly, all from non-Turkish academic sources. That's the focus for this dive.
Yeah, and we're trying to piece together what these sources tell us about where the Laz actually come from.
It's kind of a puzzle, isn't it? Because the names change over time in the records.
You see things like Colchians, Lazans, it shifts.
And the name Laz itself, it pops up relatively late in the classical texts.
Plus, the whole region, the Caucasus and the Black Sea, it's always been incredibly complex geopolitically.
Oh, absolutely. A
Right.
real crossroads of cultures, empires bumping against each other, makes tracing one single origin story, well, challenging.
And we should probably mention up front, these are external academic views.
Yeah, good point. The Laz themselves might frame their history or language differently. Some Laz intellectuals push back against purely Georgian linguistic classifications.
Preferring terms like South Caucasian, maybe.
Right, so there can be tension there. But our goal is to see what these specific sources say, using all these different angles.
Okay, let's dive in. Where do we start? History seems logical. Ancient Colchis.
Perfect starting point. Colchis flourished way back, maybe around the 13th century BCE.
And located pretty much where the Laz live now, right? Eastern Black Sea coast.
Exactly. Western Georgia, parts of northeast Turkey today. It's the land from Greek myths, Jason, the Argonauts, the Golden Fleece.
Ah, right, that Colchis.
Yeah. And historically, known for resources, gold, timber, honey. The people there, generally seen as early Kartvelian speakers.
So ancestors of modern groups like Svans and the Zans, the Lazangrillians.
Precisely. Really crucial for understanding how Georgian identity itself formed.
Didn't Herodotus say something weird about them?
He did. That controversial description called them dark-skinned Egyptians. Scholars still debate what exactly he meant.
Huh. Okay, so what was Colchis like politically?
It seems to have been a mix of tribes, maybe loosely unified at times. They definitely interacted with big players, Assyria, Urartu, Persia eventually.
And the Greeks were there too?
Yep. Greek colonies started appearing along the coast from the 8th, 6th centuries BCE. Phasis, Dioscurius, they traded, settled.
Then bigger empires got involved.
Right. It became part of the Kingdom of Pontus and then later absorbed into the Roman Empire.
So when do we first hear about the Laz specifically?
That's where it gets interesting. The actual name Laz starts appearing maybe 1st, 2nd century CE. Writers like Pliny, Orion mention them.
Orion, didn't he mention a specific place?
He did, yeah. A town called Lazos, but interestingly, north of Piteus, which has led some, like Minorsky citing Kiesling, to theorize maybe they migrated south.
Oh, so maybe not originally from the exact same spot as Colchis?
It's a possibility. Or maybe a branch of another group pushed south. It adds complexity to just saying Laz Colchians directly, though many later writers did.
So the name Colchis starts to fade out.
Pretty much. By the 3rd century CE, you see Greek and Roman sources using Lazica or Regiolazic, the Laz region.
And historians back then, like Procopius?
They often considered the Laz and the Colchians to be essentially the same people, a continuation.
But there was also this other group, the San or Zan.
Right. Arrian and Procopius mentioned them. Possibly ancestors, possibly related, later seen as distinct, it's tangled. Even the Georgian name Chani for Laz hints at these older layers.
Identities seem quite fluid back then. Then Lazica becomes a kingdom.
Yes, the Kingdom of Lazica, or Egrisi as it was also known, emerges around the 3rd, 4th century CE, covered a lot of the old Colchis territory.
And it was strategically important.
Hugely important. Became this buffer state caught between the Byzantine Empire and Sasanian Persia.
Led to conflict, I imagine.
Right. Big time. The Lazic War in the mid-6th century was a major struggle fought largely over control of Lazica. Their kings were often appointed by Constantinople, tasked with guarding Caucasian passes.
Did Christianity arrive then?
Yeah, it took root during that period, roughly 4th to 6th centuries. Then eventually the Byzantines fully annexed Lazica around 562 CE.
So a key player for a while, then absorbed. Did the name Lazica stick around?
It did for quite some time. Byzantine and Arab sources still used it for the wider Trabzon region up to the 10th century. And the Laz people remained connected to that area, including during the later empire of Trebizond.
Until the Ottomans arrived.
Right. After the fall of Trebizond in 1461, the Ottomans took over. This led to a major shift.
Religion, primarily.
Yes, the majority of Laz gradually converted to Sunni Islam over the following centuries, under the Lazistan Sanjak. though a small Christian Laz community continued in Georgia.
And that Ottoman region Lazistan roughly corresponds to.
Modern Rise and Artvin provinces in Turkey, mostly. There was also some westward migration later, 19th century, due to Russian expansion.
So that whole history being fought over, shifting alliances must have really shaped their identity.
Definitely. Constant pressure, adaptation, it builds resilience, but also leads to instability, migration. The Lazark War is a prime example. Okay, maybe we should shift gears. Talk linguistics.
Good idea. Where does the Laz language, Lazuri, fit into the picture?
Okay, so Laz belongs to the Kartvelian language family, sometimes called South Caucasian.
Which is unique to this region, right? Not Indo-European or Turkic.
Exactly, it's its own thing. The family includes Georgian, Svan, Mingrelian, and Laz. Linguists think the common ancestor, Proto-Kartvelian, goes way, way back.
How far back?
Estimates vary wildly. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years. Svan broke off first, then Georgian split from the Zan group.
And Zan is where Laz fits in.
Right. Zan includes Laz and Mingrelian. They're very closely related languages. They share a lot of history, sound systems, grammar.
So close that some people consider them dialects of one language?
Yeah, that's a big debate. Some academics, especially historically in Soviet Georgia, argued they were dialects of Zan. You can see the similarities.
But others argue they're separate languages.
Definitely.
It's
Especially many Laz intellectuals. They point to the long separation of the communities, the fact that they aren't always easily mutually intelligible, and distinct cultural identities.
Makes sense. And Lazuri itself, has it been written down?
Traditionally, no. It was an oral language. But there have been efforts, especially since the 80s in Turkey, using a Latin-based script. Sometimes the Georgian script is used too.
And it's spoken.
Primarily on that southeastern Black Sea coast of Turkey, Rise, Artvin, and a bit over the border in Georgia, in Ajara.
But it's facing challenges.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah.
UNESCO and Ethnologue classify it as endangered or threatened. There's language shift towards Turkish or Georgian, no official status, historical pressures like past bans on public speaking in Turkey. It's tough.
A familiar story for minority languages, unfortunately. What about genetics? Can DNA tell us anything more?
Well, the Caucasus generally is a hotspot of genetic diversity, a refuge during ice ages, a corridor for migrations.
You see specific genetic markers there.
Yeah, common Y-DNA haplogroups like G2A and J2, often linked to early Neolithic farmers from the Near East Anatolia. Also others like L, E1B1B, R1A, R1B. It's a complex mix.
And studies on Georgians, Mingrelians?
They show significant diversity, but they cluster with other South Caucasian populations. Autosomal DNA suggests the core gene pool was largely formed by the Bronze Age. There's overlap between modern Georgians and, say, Abkhaz, too.
Anything specific about the Laz in these studies?
They're consistently identified as a Kartvelian group alongside Mingrelians, Svans, Georgians. One interesting finding,
Yeah.
a study noted high levels of Y-DNA haplogroup L among some Pontic Greeks exiled to Georgia, and haplogroup L has also been observed among Laz people.
Suggesting shared ancestry. Or maybe assimilation.
Could be either, or both. It hints at complex interactions along that Black Sea coast over centuries. Maybe some Hellenized Laz or shared roots. It fits the picture of genetic continuity in the Caucasus since the Bronze Age, but with ongoing mixing.
So genetics generally supports the linguistic picture deep roots in the Caucasus.
Pretty much. It points to connections with ancient Near Eastern populations, likely tied to the spread of farming, but with a lot of local continuity too.
Okay, let's look at the ground itself. Archaeology. What have we found from ancient Colchis?
Archaeologically, we see a really well-developed Bronze Age culture there, the Colchian culture, linked to the Coban culture sometimes.
Known for?
Advanced metalworking, smelting, casting, from the Middle Bronze Age onwards. This fits the whole Golden Fleece mythos. Colchis was known for metals, especially gold. We find tools, pottery, evidence of farming, early settlements.
Like actual towns?
Signs of early urbanization, yes.
Yes.
Settlement mounds appearing in the coastal plains. It suggests a pretty sophisticated society existed before the main wave of Greek colonization.
And the Greek colonies, we find evidence for those too.
Oh, yeah. Sites like Phasis, Picius Pichinori clearly show Greek presence from the 6th century BCE. But crucially, they often settled near existing local Colchian settlements.
So interaction, trade, cultural exchange.
Exactly. Pichinori is a great example. You find both Greek and local Colchian burials and material culture side by side.
And later periods. Roman, Byzantine?
Yep. Roman fortresses along the coast. Early Byzantine artifacts at sites like Pichinori too. The archaeology confirms that long sequence of local development and external interaction.
A rich history literally buried there. Finally, the anthropological angle. How do the Laz view themselves based on these external sources?
Our specific foreign sources don't have tons of detailed anthropology, but some things come through. Mentions of unique food traditions as part of their heritage, the importance of the oral culture for transmitting language and history.
And identity.
That's key. Laz intellectuals, as reflected in some sources, strongly emphasize a distinct Laz identity, separate from a broader Georgian one. They root it in their specific history, language, and that connection back to ancient cultures.
Which might clash with how others see them.
Sometimes, yes. In Georgia, they might be seen as a regional subgroup. Maybe their language is a dialect. In Turkey, historically, Laz has sometimes been used inaccurately as a broad term for any Black Sea population. So Laz people often make efforts to distinguish themselves.
And religion plays a part in that identity.
Likely, yes. The shift to Sunni Islam for the majority in Turkey differentiates them from the predominantly Orthodox Christian Georgians, contributing to separate identity trajectories over the centuries.
Plus the language endangerment we talked about.
Right, that pressure definitely impacts modern identity, how it's maintained and passed on.
Okay, so pulling it all together, what's the main takeaway from these non-Turkish sources regarding Laz origins?
I think the consensus points strongly towards deep autochthonous roots for the Laz in that southeastern Black Sea region. Clear ancestral links back to the ancient Colchians.
And their language firmly places them in the Kartvelian family, very close to Mingrelian.
Exactly. It's a story shaped by millennia of history in a contested region, linguistic evolution within a unique family, a distinct genetic heritage tied to the Caucasus, and the assertion of their own cultural identity.
But it's an ongoing story, isn't it? With challenges around language, recognition.
Absolutely. Those issues of language preservation and identity are very real for the community today, as reflected even in these academic sources.
You know, studying Laz origins this way, it feels like a window into the Caucasus itself.
It really does. Deep history, linguistic diversity within related groups, the constant interplay between local peoples and big empires, the sheer impact of geography. These themes echo across the entire region.
It also highlights that history isn't always neat. There are debates, inconsistencies even within these academic sources.
That's a crucial point. Constructing any origin story depends so much on the available data, the angle you take, maybe even the background of the researchers. It's complex, not a single, simple narrative.
Something for you, the listener, to think about how these different threads weave together and sometimes pull apart. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.